Listen to This Week in Money, Saturdays on Internet Radio at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. This week's scheduled guests from Chartworks, Ross Clark. From the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report, Mark Faber. From WolfStreet.com, Wolf Richter. Plus, we'll have a company showcase update from American Manganese CEO and President Larry Ray. Don't miss This Week in Money this Saturday on Internet Radio at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineered gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard. My guest is Bob Mackin, award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.news, his website, TheBreaker.ca. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
The race for Vancouver mayor getting interesting for a number of reasons about who is running and who isn't. Well, you just have some breaking news for us about the NPA, the Nonpartisan Association's so-called non-runner, and that's Hector Bremner, who really wanted to run for mayor. And his party has decided he's not worthy of that position or that honor. Do you have any more information on that?
Well, that's right. This really blew up late Monday night into Tuesday morning when the NPA board met to decide who could get to the next step in their nomination process for their candidate to run for mayor. They have an all-important vote coming up of membership on May 29th at the Hellenic Community Center on the west side of Vancouver to decide who is going to try to return the NPA to the mayor's chair. The NPA has not had a mayor in Vancouver since 2008 when Gregor Robertson beat Peter Ladner in that election. Sam Sullivan was the mayor, but he lost the nomination to Peter Ladner. Well, the NPA feels as if it's its turn because Vision Vancouver's brand has gone right down the toilet, so much so that the two people on the center left of the political equation in Vancouver, Shauna Sylvester and Kennedy Stewart, they have decided to run quote-unquote as independents, even though Sylvester is a Visionista and Kennedy Stewart is definitely within the realm of the Visionistas, but they're not even coming near the Vision brand. They know it's toxic. The NPA can smell victory. The NPA won a seat on City Council in last fall's by-election. Jeff Meigs left Vision Vancouver to go work as John Horgan's Chief of Staff in Victoria. Spot was open. Hector Bremner, who had been an assistant to Rich Coleman and to Teresa Watt in the BC Liberal Cabinet, ran for the NPA, and won that seat partly because of low voter turnout, being a by-election, and partly because of massive fracturing of the left-wing vote. The Vision Vancouver candidate finished fifth. So Hector Bremner didn't get a majority of votes. He got a plurality of votes, very little votes, but enough to get him onto City Council, and he was going to use that as his springboard to run for the mayoralty. He had Mark Marison, Christy Clark's ex-husband, who is a political backroomer extraordinaire, who he helped get Christy Clark into power and keep her into power for so many years until, of course, she fell out of power last year. He saw an opportunity that Vancouver City Council and Vancouver City Hall was in play, and normally when there is a left-wing government in Victoria, then that gives rise to a center-right-wing party to take power at City Hall in Vancouver, and his horse that he was riding was Hector Bremner. Even though Hector Bremner has very little in the way of business or academic experience, he's been in trouble recently. He's actually under investigation by City Hall over complaints about his lobbying. He's the vice president of the Pace Group, which is a lobbying company that represents a lot of big developers, including the Aquilinis, and there have been some votes that he's been involved with in City Council that some people have made complaints. A couple of people who are connected to the NPA say that they're members of the NPA have complained to City Hall, and City Hall is taking it very seriously. The mayor has appointed an investigator to do a preliminary investigation, and based on the results of that investigation, there may be a full investigation which could also include some penalties for Bremner himself. However, he's paid the ultimate price now. He's not going forward in the NPA process. The NPA has been kind of slow to communicate the reasons. It says it's not communicated the reasons for purposes of confidentiality and for worries about harming Bremner's reputation. They did have a very detailed 50-plus page questionnaire that each of the candidates had to fill out. The questionnaire that I got a copy of and reported on it on the Breaker.news, that is the way political parties should be screening their candidates. They don't want surprises. They don't want a candidate who is going to be in scandal during the campaign, a candidate who's going to be in scandal after the campaign. They want to take power the right way. It looks like the NPA did do it by the book, because there are some questions about Mr. Bremner's background in business, in politics, the lobbying, for instance, and the NPA knows that if they choose the wrong candidate, that opens the door to Vision Vancouver being allowed another 4 years. The NPA released a statement on the afternoon of May 10th by President Greg Baker after Bremner had appeared in a Vancouver Sun story where he alleged that race played a role in his rejection from the mayoral race for the NPA nomination. Greg Baker is saying that that was, quote, untrue, unfounded, and defamatory, and the NPA is not going to tolerate that, and is actually getting legal advice about how much it can release about Bremner's application to be a candidate. The NPA appears to be wanting to catch up and be transparent and to try to protect its reputation, because it's taken a bit of a beating this week because of the way that Hector Bremner, along with his campaign head Mark Marison, communicated this. They try to get ahead of the story immediately. It's as if they had a plan B ready, because I understand that they had been unhappy for quite a while with some of the questions that were being asked on this candidate questionnaire. This questionnaire asks all sorts of questions about legal and financial and political and personal matters. It wants to know if you've had any criminal or civil problems before. It wants to know about your lobbying activities. It made a lot of invasive questions about lobbying activities, and whoever wrote this wanted to see if they could perhaps cancel a lobbyist out of the equation. Lobbyists are not the most popular people in the political sphere. There is a role for them to play. But in a city like Vancouver, which does not have a lobbyist registry, and the connection between lobbyists and fundraising is troubling to many people who are concerned about the integrity of government, that maybe now isn't the time, the NPA felt, or at least those on the NPA board felt, not the time to have a lobbyist running for the biggest office in Vancouver, especially when they believe that victory is close at hand. If they put the wrong candidate up, it's going to be another 4 years of Vision or a Vision-like candidate winning the office.
Well, I could see why you'd be concerned about a lobbyist, because are you electing somebody who directly represents some big companies?
Well, indeed, and Bremner works for the Pace Group, and one of their biggest clients is the Equity Investment Group, which owns the Canucks and Rogers Arena. Equity Investment Group is also a partner with several First Nations in the Vancouver area on some major land deals that will turn into development applications that will have to go to City Hall and come before City Council for approval. So even though Bremner is trying to say he doesn't do lobbying right now, he does work for a company which derives revenue from a very important and powerful client that has ambitions, along with its partners in First Nations, to bring forward some very ambitious proposals for redevelopment, which may include very substantial amounts of housing. And Bremner's big issue that he is putting forward, or has put forward in his campaign, is under the slogan "Let's fix housing." He wants to build more housing supply, and so that connection there. There's a perception among the public that there may be too cozy a connection between Bremner, the company he works for, and a major landholder / land developer, which has some big ambitions. And if in the mayor's chair, would Bremner be able to properly represent the people's interests versus any loyalty he may have presently or in the past to those who helped put food on his table? Those are some serious questions, and of course those are questions that if Bremner had won the nomination and carried forward into the campaign, would have been asked by his opponent and could have been enough to certainly sway the electorate if the electorate is concerned about the ability of developers to have influence over City Hall, even though there is no more corporate or union donations anymore to election campaigns in election years. They are allowed to still donate to party operations in non-election years, and the Aquilinis have put a lot of money into various political parties in the past on all sides of the political spectrum, parties that they believe can listen to them and help them get their concerns addressed and help them further their business goals. And when you've got someone like Hector Bremner that was representing that pro-development platform in his candidacy for the NPA mayoralty nomination, coming from a company that is so closely tied to the Aquilini family, it raises some serious questions about whether Bremner would be giving his entire undivided attention to the concerns of the public, or if he'd be wearing two hats or helping out a very important and powerful company that has big plans for the city and a company that has put food on his table.
Well, how useful is an election funding law that only restricts funding out of 1 year out of 4? Do they not think people have bank accounts?
That's a big problem, especially when you've got a law like that, which doesn't go all the way to protect all the public's interests. It's a law that was written in many ways to protect the interests of political parties, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum. And it's also a law that doesn't require political parties to tell us how much they bring in, who donates to them, and how they spend their money in non-election years. The law says that we have a right to know what happens in general election years and also years when there are by-elections, those rare years when there are by-elections, but we don't know what goes on the rest of the time in non-election years, and Elections BC doesn't necessarily have an aggressive or well-resourced group of auditors and investigators. We saw what happened last year when there were stories that forced Elections BC to start investigating donations by lobbyists to political parties on behalf of their clients. Well, Elections BC eventually just shrugged its shoulders and said, we can't go any further, so we're going to hand it over to the RCMP. So you look at the elections, or look at the municipal side of things, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of municipalities around the province that Elections BC has to oversee campaign financing for, and they just don't have the manpower to be able to properly investigate and audit and make sure that there is the proper accountability. So, major questions about the way the law was written and how it'll all shake out this fall, because it really is starting to show us that there are some shifts going on, because there's going to be a new style of campaigning this year. Third parties, political action committees will pop up to try to fill the void that parties couldn't do before. And then when you have a loose slate of candidates versus a party, well, each of those candidates can raise more money on their own as a loose slate than they could as a member of a party. If you can only donate $1,200 to a party, but you can donate $1,200 to every independent candidate. So the big money is still around in one way, shape, or form. We're probably moving towards being a little more responsible than we were in the past as a province. Maybe Quebec is a good example of limiting it even further, but it is a good step forward. We'll see how it all works this year. It may require a lot more tinkering than the NDP thought it would.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. PowerBand Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, NDP MP Kennedy Stewart in Burnaby has decided he wants to run for mayor of Vancouver. What's your feeling on that? And is this just another indication that there are no real big names in this race yet?
Well, it's going to be opening up an interesting opportunity for Jagmeet Singh to run for Parliament, to get a seat in Parliament, which he needs to get more attention as we get nearer the 2019 campaign. So that'll help the NDP federally, so Kennedy Stewart seems to be taking one for the team. And if he loses this campaign this fall, well, he can always try again to regain a seat in Parliament in the fall of 2019. He's someone who did come to prominence recently. He, along with Elizabeth May from the Green Party, did go and protest against Kinder Morgan. They got arrested at the fence of the tank farm in Burnaby Mountain. So he got his 15 minutes there in the national and local spotlight. And, that issue in the city of Vancouver, as well as in Burnaby, is one that does resonate with voters, not all left-wing voters. Some middle of the road, some even right of center are wondering, well, gee, what about this possible threat to the environment? The Marathassah oil spill from 2015 did have a bit of a resonating effect because that's still in courts right now. That company that owns that ship still hasn't paid for the mess it made. And that is a bit of a concern, especially when that was just a grain freighter versus an oil tanker. So there are still concerns about the tanker issue. But Kennedy Stewart running as an independent for that center-left vote against Shauna Sylvester, who's running for the center-left vote as an independent too. She announced back in early April that she was running. She's someone that's been a director of Vision Vancouver, someone who is quite close to Joel Solomon, the Vision Vancouver bagman, as well as Gregor Robertson himself. I call this debranding, because the Vision Vancouver brand in the last couple of years has declined so far because it's a party that did nothing for the housing issue, the affordability issue. They did as little on the civic side of things as the BC Liberals did on the provincial side of things. And interestingly enough, there was a crossover in Vision with the BC Liberals among federal Liberal supporters. That Vision Vancouver really only came to prominence not because of its NDP roots, but because they became a coalition, kind of a center-left coalition. Sometimes they even took sides on issues that were a little bit business-friendly, or trying to be business-friendly, or trying to appear business-friendly, but they were mainly in the center and the left, and they were a coalition. That's what we have here in BC. It's big on coalition politics versus party politics. And we've seen the Liberals, federal Liberals especially, start to move back to the NPA in the last year or so. And Vision has weakened. It's also seen people who have been the driving force behind the scenes of Vision go to work in the Trudeau government in Ottawa, and seen a lot of them also find jobs in the NDP government in Victoria or the NDP head office. The Vision machine isn't what it used to be, and it's really running on second, third, and fourth stringers. There's only a couple of councillors who are looking at re-election this year. The rest of them are going a real changing the guard. And Vision, through its history, has really been the Gregor Robertson party. And as Gregor Robertson's popularity waned, so did Vision's, to the point that Vision kind of hummed and hawed and said it was not going to run a candidate. Now, it says it's going to run a candidate, but if you've got Shauna Sylvester and Kennedy Stewart running as independents, could they really just be waiting to test the waters and see if they could re-enter the Vision sphere and try to breathe life, maybe a last-ditch effort, into the brand to put the brand on the ballot this fall? We don't quite know, but right now you've got the NPA trying to sort itself out, trying to put out the Hector Bremner fire. Meanwhile, in the center and the left, you've got a couple of options, at least, for voters of that stripe. But Vision Vancouver seems like a real dead issue right now. Of course, the great Rafe Mayer often said that 6 weeks is a lifetime in politics, and you never know what can happen in 6 weeks, let alone 1 week, that can change the fortunes of these parties and these candidates.
Well, the NPA has turned out to be the party that likes to so-called eat its young. I mean, they rejected Philip Olin, who was a standing mayor. They rejected Sam Sullivan, who was a standing mayor, breaking political tradition where you usually support the incumbent. What are they going to stand on this time?
Well, they've got to stand on fiscal responsibility. They've got to stand on back to basics. Because what has happened in Vancouver since 2008 when Gregor Robertson took over, he's become really a globalist mayor. He's become a mayor who, in fact, this week is off in New York at another conference talking about green cities and smart cities and urbanization. He's in New York, in Manhattan. He's not here in Vancouver rolling up his sleeves to deal with the housing affordability crisis. He's not here in Vancouver rolling up his sleeves to deal with the opioid crisis. He of course, promised to, in the 2008 platform, to solve street homelessness, and we've got the most recent numbers, and that's actually up. He never did solve it by 2015, and it probably won't be solved by 2025 or 2035. He really was riding the wave of image politics, of Obama-style campaigning, of social media campaigning, and a youthful image, a green image. He ticked a lot of boxes. They did a lot of well-researched campaigns. They knew what they could ride on in order to get elected to try to please the people. People, even his supporters, have realized that this kind of candidate is no longer useful. So I think the NPA knows what it needs to do, and it really is back to basics. If you remember what happens, we've had some tough winters in December, some big snowfalls, and after that happens, well, there's been photos of snowplows on bike lanes, but snowed-in streets, and people desperate to get road salt to melt the ice. That's just one example. A lot of potholes around town. There's a lot of attention paid to bike lanes. Cyclists have got what they want, but drivers are kind of hot under the collar. It's not an easy city to get around anymore, and it gets even more expensive if you want to go downtown. People are concerned also about police services, fire services. They pay a lot in taxes. Vision Vancouver has spent more and taxed more, and people really want to know they have someone in City Hall who will pay attention to the area between Boundary Road and UBC and Burrard Inlet and the Fraser River, because that's the jurisdiction. Anything outside of that is not Gregor Robertson's jurisdiction. It's not anyone who's running the jurisdiction. It's back to basics. And as I've written about in the Breaker.news, there has been expansion of the number of people at City Hall who are paid $100,000 or more. The $100,000 Club Plus reached 1,300 people this year. Last year was 1,300 people in 2017. In 2016, it was 900. The spending has gone way faster and higher than inflation, and that comes from the pockets of taxpayers in Vancouver, both residences and businesses. And if you go to certain parts of downtown, certain blocks on Robson Street, for instance, you'll see a sea of empty storefronts. And we all know, of course, that there is a bit of a disruption in the retail world because online shopping. Amazon, of course, they're coming here in a few years to add more staff than they already have right now. And a lot of people are seeing the merits of online shopping and the cost effectiveness and the speedy delivery, but people also want functioning neighborhoods. And when you have a lot of empty storefronts, that means there's less people coming to shop, less people coming along to have coffee and have a community. And other areas of the city, heritage houses have been replaced by monster houses. You've got the breakneck speed of tower development that is changing the face of Vancouver for good, the bad, and the ugly. And the Vancouver that we grew up with is gone forever. I think a lot of people realize that. But I think people want to have a bit of a pause to catch the breath of the city, to make sure that the city can care for the people that live here and make sure that there's enough opportunity for the people that live here to stay here. And so the NPA has a big challenge in its campaign to put someone up for City Hall, but the NPA has made a lot of messages along the way through its current group of people on council who have often opposed what Vision has tabled. And it really is about being fiscally responsible and paying attention to the needs of Vancouver in Vancouver and Vancouverites in Vancouver versus traveling on junkets around the world like Gregor Robertson has, being this all-star celebrity mayor palling around with Mike Bloomberg and Barack Obama like he has and other celebrities. It really does demand a back-to-basics approach to deal with what City Hall can do, which is proper land use decision, roads, sewers, police, fire. I mean, those really are the basics. And community centers, too. Make sure community centers are running properly.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, is there any more news on the number of mayors that will not be running for re-election in October?
Still is static. About half the mayors in Metro Vancouver are not running. Interestingly enough, a lot of them will get together perhaps for one last time at the end of June when TransLink's board will have a joint meeting with the Mayor's Council. And that will be to likely rubber stamp the recommendations by TransLink to spend a lot of money, a lot more money than voters were told in the 2015 plebiscite, which was rejected, to build a lot less than they were promised. The Broadway subway and the Surrey LRT are what I'm talking about. They announced the new prices on April 30th. Of course, October 20th is the election date. The Broadway subway is going to cost at least $2.83 billion. And the Surrey LRT, just the Surrey Newton-Guildford line, is going to cost about $1.65 billion. They're not going to get to the Surrey Langley line yet. They say they don't have a cost available to make public yet. So people in the City of Vancouver, City of Surrey, other areas are going to be getting less for more. These prices were withheld from the public for a couple of years, but finally sprang upon the public on the last day of April of this year, and they are finishing up a quickie 2-week consultation process, which is really just a sales spiel. A lot of PR people going to farmers markets and shopping malls with nice displays to sell the benefits and kind of downplay the costs. So the mayors are going to get together, and half of them are lame ducks, and half of them are not. and a lot of them will not be around to deal with the accountability of this project, both projects. That the prices have gone up well over $1.5 billion more than what was sold to the public and what the public rejected back in 2015. In order to pay for this, there will be higher taxes for parking, higher taxes on property taxes. There will be new taxes on new condo buildings that are built, and there will be fare increases. So that is the TransLink portion. The federal and provincial governments are coming together, of course, with more than $2 billion each. This whole plan is about $7.3 billion, which includes expanded bus service and expanded existing SkyTrain service too. I'm sure there will be some benefits. People who use public transit will certainly enjoy more frequent service and better service. But TransLink is a very troubled organization. They are dealing with a $600,000 WorkSafe BC fine that was assessed before last Christmas. And there have been a number of departures, both willing and unwilling, of people in middle management and senior management. And there are still questions about the maintenance of the existing SkyTrain lines and the safety for workers. This is an organization which is doing its best to get more money in its pocket so it can spend more and expand, but it's not an agency that has been very willing to be transparent or accountable. The only thing demonstrative they have done in recent years is open the board meetings to the public. They actually used to hold board meetings behind closed doors after having a public question period where the public could come and complain to the TransLink board, but then they'd hide, going scurrying off and hide behind closed doors for the rest of their meetings, so you never knew if the concerns of the public were actually rated and debated by the board. So that's TransLink for you, an agency which is a monopoly agency which enjoys the support of the NDP government. And unfortunately, the way the last election went in 2017, transit was a big issue, and the clone speech that the BC Liberals had last June, well, that basically adopted the NDP position. So the BC Liberals are a bit of an ineffective opposition when it comes to criticizing TransLink. A lot of their donors, also the BC Liberals, in construction and real estate, are going to benefit from this massive infusion of public dollars, just like a lot of the funders of the NDP and unions will benefit from the big union contracts for construction workers. And, of course, it all means higher costs for the public, because cost overruns are absolutely inevitable in major infrastructure projects. There's a professor over at Oxford University, Bent Flyberg, who has studied this phenomenon over the years, and 9 out of 10 projects he studied, and he studied hundreds and hundreds of projects around the world, a variety of projects from dams to public transportation. 9 out of 10 projects he studied have gone over budget, and we're kind of used to that in BC, but if we had better cost containment and more efficient expenditures on projects, we might actually have more projects. We might even have the rapid transit we want by now, if not for all the waste and potential corruption.
In Richmond, they discovered that there were a number of ride-sharing apps, mostly in the Chinese language, that were running. Has anything happened with investigations into that?
Well, the government says it's still looking into it, but from what I found out, that they really gave us not even a slap on the wrist. It was like a hit and miss, or a miss slap. And it may have been because the previous BC Liberal government really wanted the market to police itself. They were all about industry self-regulation, and they weren't really wanting to step into the marketplace even when they knew that things were amiss. And that seemed to be the case with various companies that created ride-sharing apps, which were targeted to mainly Chinese audiences. There were several that were operating, and some are still operating in Richmond. Around April and May last year, there was an investigator in the transport branch, the passenger transport branch, who was doing research and finding cars that were listed on an app called Raccoon Go, and was able to run their license plates, and then they sent cease and desist letters to the owners. In some cases, the owners were also the drivers of these vehicles, and they told them that you better stop charging passengers for transportation in your vehicle because you're not licensed for it, and we're not going to offer a license for it. It's not legal yet. You don't have the proper insurance. You could be liable for thousands of dollars of fines, so cease and desist. They got a variety of responses and several non-responses. There were a couple of people that essentially admitted what they were doing and said they wouldn't do it again. There are several people that denied that it was even them and alleged that there was mistaken identity. And then there were several that never responded at all. And there was only one that they got the police involved, someone from Coquitlam, but that appeared to be another matter, a prohibition on driving. The person may have had either a drunk driving matter or a speeding matter. It's not quite clear. But the long and the short of it is that they sent out these letters, and I got a number of them through FOI, that they didn't actually go any further than the cease and desist. This was something that, again, started in April and May of 2017, and then they sent out the letters in late August and early September 2017, just shortly after the NDP had come into power. I'm going to check again to see what happens if the NDP, which now knows more about the problems at ICBC, is going to take a harder line on this because, again, this could be costing the public treasury and ICBC a lot of money if unlicensed rideshare companies are getting into trouble, are getting into accidents, causing injuries, causing damage, and taking away business from the taxi companies, which are properly licensed and paying proper business and licensing fees and employing people in dispatch and in the vehicles themselves. Of course, we're waiting for the government to sort out the situation with Uber and Lyft versus taxis. It's only a matter of time before they drop the ban and allow these companies to offer their services through apps to British Columbians who want to drive for them and British Columbians who want another transportation option. It can't last this way forever, but taxi companies, of course, are worried about their future. It's just a matter of when, not if.
What's the latest on Attorney General David Eby's investigation into money laundering?
Well, we're still waiting for the Peter German report, the report that will chart the way forward. It was submitted at the end of March on schedule, and it may not be made public until the end of May. When I talked to David Eby about it, that report was going through the process. Apparently, there were some parts of it that did get into terrain that could be potentially harming personal privacy or harming the ability of the police to do their investigation. Apparently, Peter German did his due diligence and found a lot of information through his investigation that has shed a new light on the dark underbelly of the gambling industry here in British Columbia. What is interesting, though, is that Eby has not made any major changes in management or on the board of BC Lottery Corporation or on the Gaming Policy and Enforcement Branch. Again, he wears two hats as a minister, both of marketer with BCLC and as regulator with GPEB. The chief executive of BC Lottery Corporation, Jim Lightbody, and Vice President Brad Desmarais, who's in charge of casinos, he's actually a former cop, a long-time cop, they are still in their jobs. And when I talked to him, he had a very interesting answer that if he said that if anyone at BCLC had not met their responsibilities under law and regulation, he would have dealt with them by now. But when I asked him if the jobs of both Desmarais and Lightbody are safe, he had quite an interesting answer, and I'll just read it to you, quote it for you, that he said, "I've been working closely with the executive at BCLC throughout the German review and will continue to work closely with them as we work to implement the recommendations that he has put forward. Mr. German's report will speak for itself in terms of what exactly the issues were he identified in his review, and I look forward to releasing it as quickly as possible." That is the answer that David Eby, the Attorney General, gave me when I asked him to specifically comment on whether or not the jobs of Jim Lightbody, the CEO, and Brad Desmarais, the VP, are safe. He didn't answer that with a yes or a no. So, I'm looking at Jim Lightbody, especially as someone who is on the hot seat historically, because in 2007, the BCLC CEO at the time was Vic Polishchuk, and the ombudsperson at the time, Kim Carter, did a deep report onto the unusually high rate of big lottery wins by retailers and retail employees around BC. That's the sale of lottery tickets. And she found there were major gaps in the way prizes were paid out, and how lottery ticket retailers were enforced and overseen by BCLC, and she found poor protection of consumers. Gordon Campbell was the premier at the time, and the BCLC board took swift and immediate action after that report was released, and they fired Vic Polishchuk. Now that was about lotteries, and even since 2007, casinos have become a major driver of revenue for BCLC and a major force in the business community in British Columbia. Major construction projects, major tourist draws, and of course a major magnet, we are told, of criminals bringing money through various means, through various criminal means. From China, we're told a lot of it comes from. And this has had implications, ripple effects in the illegal drug trade, and has had ripple effects in the real estate trade. The stakes are higher. The stakes are higher for BCLC now. The stakes are higher for Jim Lightbody than they ever were for Vic Polishchuk. And that non-answer from David Eby suggests to me that maybe Mr. Lightbody will not be the CEO this time next year. Maybe not by summer. Maybe he'll decide to go somewhere else, or maybe Attorney General Eby will find a way to replace him sooner than later. But I think there's going to be some action on that at the end of May. There's got to be some change at the leadership of BCLC, whether it's on the board or in management. One way or another, I think there's going to be some major changes. Of course, the questions that a lot of British Columbians have is who will be held accountable? Because maybe Jim Lightbody and the other executives at BCLC were just following orders from their political masters. Mike de Jong was the minister in charge of BCLC and GPEB before David Eby, and before then we had Rich Coleman as minister for many years, and Rich Coleman was the minister in charge who actually decided as Solicitor General to shut down an RCMP squad which was charged with breaking up illegal gambling rings. So that decision back in 2009 had ripple effects that brought us to present day. Will any of the politicians who made those choices ever be held accountable?
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.News, Bob Mackin. His website, thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.